Welcome back to War Thunder News. This week we've had battle rating updates, World War mode, and some interesting information. So be sure to hit the subscribe button. First, let's talk about World War mode and the event vehicles. So like the last seasons of World War mode, there's the event where you do the things. I don't like World War mode. I'm just gonna put that out there. I played it the first time it came around, did not like it. I'm continuing not to like it. This time it's in realistic mode, but I still am not going to bother because it's not really the game mode, but the way the game is played. But along with the mode coming, they're also giving away some stuff as they've done in World War mode events prior. This time, since it's focused on modern vehicles, they're giving away a modern tank, as well as an IL-2 with the M82 engine. The IL-2 actually is just an IL-2 with the M82 engine, so it looks different. I don't know if it's stronger or weaker. I forgot to check. But what everyone else really cares about is the M60 AMBT. When this first showed up, I had quite the smirk on my face because I remember making a YouTube video about its model being leaked about a year ago from now. And before you start telling me, no, that was the M60 SLEP, this one has a 25mm autocannon on the back of its turret, therefore it's totally different. You're wrong there. No, I was right. You can check in the files, they call it the M60 SLEP. Although actually it makes me wonder, perhaps we could get the actual SLEP variant that doesn't have the turret in the back for the main tree. But what is there to say about this vehicle? It looks like a glass cannon, and I don't think it's going to do that well at the battle range at 10.0. It's armed with the Abrams 120mm cannon and had the APFS DS round that can penetrate 500mm, which is great and all, but you're quite a big target and you have no armor. Not even against the heat shells, as despite having a chicken coop around your turret, the modern heat shells are going to fly right through that. So cool, I guess. It does provide a bit of armor, which is interesting, especially if someone tries to sneak up on you with a meme tank. But besides that, I don't expect it to do that well. Now, if you're interested in either of these vehicles, the IL-2, which is an IL-2 with a different engine, or the M60 AMBT, you can get these by completing tasks or challenges like you would for any other War Thunder event, which are actually easier if you're in a participating squadron, or you can just purchase the tasks for 999 golden eagles. To get the IL-2, you only need to do 4 of them, and get the tank, you need to do 8, and there is 10 in total. If you do all 10, you get some extra goodies, and if you place higher in the leaderboards, you can get another one as well, either if you're a regular fighter or a commander of a squadron, and I assume those ones you can actually sell. But that's not all on this World War dev blog that they had here. Now, in the comments, the top comment made by War Thunder CT Center said, ah yes, more US and Soviet event vehicles, because the 2 Merkavas just weren't enough. You also wait for a thing like PZL-37 Los. I feel your pain. So there's 3 ways you can take this. The first is at face value. It's a joke. Here's a random vehicle, please give. You might be saying, well, we all know that Stona is Polish, so of course he'd be wanting a Polish vehicle. Then there's the third way where you put your tinfoil hat on and watch one of my older videos in which I talked about a possible Polish tech tree coming to War Thunder based on some of the things that Sim10AP had jokingly talked about. So this is where things get interesting, is why are these 2 different people joking about Poland being added to the game? Perhaps maybe Poland is being added to the game and this is just all pretext to it. Or maybe I'm just trying to find patterns where there aren't any actual patterns. Regardless, that's not the only tinfoil hat thing going around. On my Discord, I was linked to some interesting images of a Russian ground attacker jet, the Su-25 FrogFoot. Now these images included, of course, the FrogFoot itself, the landing gear, an animation of the landing gear, and a cockpit. It was implied that these were to be coming to War Thunder. However, I unfortunately found very little proof that this is to be confirmed. There was no War Thunder icon anywhere on any of the images. The description of the images did not state that they're for War Thunder. While the 3D artist has worked on video games in the past, he has never worked for Gaijin before. Despite all that, I'm still willing to entertain the idea that perhaps it is for War Thunder, based almost entirely off the fact that I was able to find these images also being proclaimed to be for War Thunder on, I think it was a Russian 2chan website. I didn't stick around that website very long as it didn't seem to be rich in information, and I was getting some inappropriate advertisements. But the fact that some random people on some sketchy site were talking about perhaps this could be added to War Thunder makes me think that maybe there is something behind this that few know. There's also the possibility that people are hyping themselves out because showing an image of an aircraft that could be added to War Thunder, if people want added to War Thunder and say, hey, this is going to be added to War Thunder, kind of iffy. I could find any old 3D model on ArtStation and say, hey, look, they're going to add this to War Thunder. So you got to tell me, are they going to add a FrogFoot to War Thunder? I personally would like the FrogFoot because it would be very cool. But also, if they do add the FrogFoot, that basically confirms A10 and that Chinese thing. But think about it, you cannot add the FrogFoot without A10. That would just be heretical. But essentially, to gather my thoughts on this subject, correct. I don't think it's coming because of a few things based off. There's very little proof that this has anything to do with War Thunder. The skin is bizarre, and I typically don't see complex skins on the 3D models that go into the game. What could be going for it is a feeling, I guess. It seems like it could come in the game. There wouldn't be really anything up against it. Like, it wouldn't be OP in my sense. Maybe to tanks, but to other aircraft, it wouldn't be doing anything special. But regardless, tell me what you think. Is the FrogFoot coming? Is this FrogFoot coming? Is the A10 coming? Next subject, there were some data mines, actually quite a few. However, a lot of them, while very long, didn't seem to be full of really any prevalent information. However, one of my Discord moderators, CT Center, had discovered some new reskins of a Chi-He and a Crusader tank. The camouflage of the tanks was a bit off, seemed very basic. However, they were covered in unique decals, which we can expect to stay on the final product, while the skins will most likely be updated. The question of why was brought up, and a conclusion was quickly come to. Stated by Magazine 2, they also might be bundled as part of starter packs, because the starter packs for Great Britain, Japan are not as good as the other nations, and Italy don't have one yet. This was reinforced by the store team dude saying, yep. Then someone asked, is it next major update material, or can we see it before the update drops? And the store team dude replied to that saying, I don't see the point in waiting with such minor additions until fall, you know. Which answers two questions actually, if you think about it. First one being the question asked, but also, when is the update coming out? Apparently in fall. And now with all the fun stuff out of the way, let's get to the numbers. There was a large number of battle ratings that changed recently, which included raising the max battle rating from 10.3 to 10.7. So let's go over those, and I shall be treating it like I did the lists in my last video, where I timestamp everything, go from the US, and start with the lowest battle ratings. With the P40C going up from 2.0 to 2.3 in arcade, and from 2.3 to 2.7 in realistic. The P51D10 moved down from 4.7 to 4.3. The F104A moved up from 9.7 to 10.0, as well as the C. Also for the US tree, the SB2U2 and the 3 had been grouped together, as well as the A62B10 and 50 had been grouped together. For US ground vehicles, a absolute piece of garbage known as the M60 A1 CGMC had been moved down from 3.0 to 2.7, as well as moved to rank 2. The M56 in arcade had been moved down from 6.3 to 6.0, and the M1A2, both in realistic and arcade, had been moved from 10.3 to 10.7. Also, the M19 had been moved to rank 3. For US helicopters, the H64A, as well as the premium variant, had been moved to 10.3 across the board, and the H64D had been moved to 10.7 across the board. For US boats, the PT-103 and PT-109 had been moved from 2.0 to 1.7 across the board. The PC-466 had been moved across the board from 2.3 to 2.0. The LCS L3 had actually been moved down across the board, finally, to 3.7, and the Asheville PGM-84 had also followed the LCS, moving to 3.7. Next up, German aircraft. The ME-410B1 for ballistic and simulator had been moved to 4.0 from 4.7. The ME-410B2 U4 had been moved in realistic from 4.3 to 4.0, and from simulator from 4.7 to 4.3. And the ME-410A1-U had been moved in realistic from 5.0 to 4.7. Also, the A1U4 and the B2U4 had been grouped together. The G91R4 had moved from 9.0 to 8.7 in arcade, and the MiG-19S had been moved from 10.3 to 10.0 in arcade and realistic. Other things happened to their air tree. The HE-111 H16 had been moved to rank 2. The Do-217 K1 and M1 had been grouped together, as well as the Ta-152 H1 and C3 had been grouped together. For German tanks, the Squeezy Boy had been moved from 1.3 to 1.0 for arcade and simulator. The Strumpanzer II had been moved from 1.7 to 1.3 in realistic. The Panzerjäger 1 had been moved from 1.7 to 1.3 across the board. And I say across the board because no tanks had their simulator battle rating changed, because simulator doesn't really use battle ratings. The Flak Panzer 38 in realistic had been moved down from 2.0 to 1.7. The Flak Half-Track had been moved down from 3.0 to 2.7 across the board. The Stu 42G was moved in arcade from 3.0 to 2.7. The Stug 3F was moved in arcade from 3.7 to 3.3. And the Panzerwerfer was moved across the board from 3.7 to 3.0. And the thing could function fine at 3.7 if they made rockets have a proper aiming system, but alright, Gaijin. The Panzer 470A was moved across the board from 5.0 to 4.7, and realistic realistic, the Panther D was moved from 5.7 to 5.3 because wearaboos actually suck. The Kugelblitz in arcade was moved from 6.7 to 7.0, and the Flak Raz Paz 1 was moved in realistic from 10.0 to 9.7, as well as the Leopard 2A5 being moved from 10.3 to 10.7. Other changes happening to their tree: the Beagle Panzer 57 and TAM were moved to after the BMP-1, the Rakuten Jagdpanzers were moved after the Jagdtiger, and the Leo 2K was stated to have a battle rating change but did not receive one. For German helicopters, their Tiger was moved from 10.3 to 10.7, and for German boats, the Jaguar class 140 was moved from 3.7 to 4.0 across the board, as well as the MZ1 being moved from 3.7 to 3.3 across the board, and those two ships switched places. Oswald, the Cannon Boot K2, was moved from 3.7 to 4.0 across the board. For Russian aircraft, the Yak-3U was moved from 6.0 to 5.7 in arcade, from 5.7 to 5.3 in realistic, and from 6.3 to 6.0 in simulator, as well as it switched places with the Yak-9 UT. The Yak-3 VK-107 in arcade was moved from 6.0 to 5.7. The Su-7B was moved from 9.7 to 10.0 in arcade and realistic. The MiG-19 PT was moved from 10.3 to 10.0 in arcade and realistic. The MiG-21 F-13 was moved from 10.3 to 10.0 in arcade and realistic as well. And the IL-10 and IL-10 1946 were grouped together. For Russian tanks, it was mostly tank destroyers getting battle rating changes, but anyways, the Su-51 was moved in arcade and realistic from 1.3 to 1.0. The Su-76M, as well as premium variant, was moved from 2.7 to 2.0. Also was moved to before the ZIS-30 in rank 1, while the ZIS-30 itself in arcade was moved from 2.7 to 2.3. The Su-122 was moved in arcade from 2.7 to 2.3 and in realistic from 3.0 to 2.7. The Su-57B was moved from 3.3 to 3.0 across the board, as well as moved to rank 2. The ASU-57 was moved from 4.0 to 3.7 in arcade. The Su-152 was moved from 5.0 to 4.7 across the board, as well as was grouped with the ISU-152, and that group was moved after the Su-58 and before the Su-58M. The Object 279 was moved from 8.3 to 8.7 in arcade and realistic. The BMP-3 was moved in arcade from 8.7 to 8.3, while it and the Object 685 was moved to rank 6. Speaking of which, it was moved in arcade from 8.7 to 8.3. The T-62M1 was moved across the board from 9.0 to 8.7, as well as it being grouped with the T-62. The BMP-2M across the board was moved from 9.3 to 9.0. The Strum S got the same treatment, and the Chrysanthema S was moved from 9.7 to 9.3 across the board. And finally, the T-80U was moved from 10.3 to 10.7 across the board. Other movements in their tree: the KV-2 was moved out of its group and located before the KV-1S, as well as being changed from rank 3 to rank 2. Also, the T-55A and T-62 had switched places. For Russian helicopters, the Mi-35 and Ka-50 were moved from 10.0 to 10.3 across the board, and the Ka-52 and the Mi-28N were moved from 10.3 to 10.7 across the board. For Russian boats, the Project 123 BIS was moved from 1.7 to 2.0. The BMO was moved from 2.3 to 2.7. The Project 191M was moved from 2.7 to 3.0. The MBK 161 1943 was moved from 2.7 to 3.0. The MBK Project 186 Mark 85 was moved from 3.0 to 3.3, and the Project 35 was moved from 4.3 to 4.0. For British aircraft, there was only one, and it was the Lightning F6 being moved from 10.0 to 9.7. For British tanks, the Valentine Mark 11 in realistic was moved from 3.0 to 2.7. The Archer across the board was moved from 3.3 to 3.0, and the Challenger 2 F2 was moved from 10.3 to 10.7. For their helicopters, once again only one, the AH Mark 1 was moved from 10.0 to 10.7, and for British boats, the Farmile A ML100 was moved from 1.7 to 1.3, the Farmile D. Both variants, as well as the River class, were all moved from 3.7 to 3.3, and the HMS Belfast was moved from 5.3 to 5.7. The BR Change List said that the Belfast went from 5.3 to 5.3, but that's a typo on Gaijin's part. For Japanese planes, only one was changed around. The F-104J was moved from 10.0 to 10.3. For their tanks, the Ho-Ro was moved from 1.7 to 1.3 across the board, as well as moved back to rank 1, which, okay, got moved there for a few months for no good reason. The Ho-Ri prototype was moved from 6.0 to 6.3 in arcade. The Type 16 was moved from 9.3 to 9.0 in realistic, and both of the Type 90s were moved from 10.0 to 10.3. For their helicopters, their Apache was moved from 10.3 to 10.7, and for their boats, the Type 5 was moved from 2.0 to 1.7. The The Sionin was moved from 3.3 to 3.7, and the Keiko was moved from 5.3 to 5.0. For China, their aircraft, the CW21 for arcade and simulator, was moved from 1.7 to 2.0. The P66 was moved for arcade from 2.0 to 2.3, and the same was done to their premium P40. The Chinese F104A was moved from 9.7 to 10.0 in realistic, and their G was moved from 10.0 to 10.3 in realistic. The J6A was moved from 10.3 to 10.0 in arcade and realistic, and the J72 was moved from 10.3 to 10.0 in arcade and realistic as well. For Chinese ground, the Su-76M was moved from 2.7 to 2.0 and moved before the LVT ZIS-2. The SZD-63 was moved from 3.7 to 4.0, who could have called it, and the CM-11 was moved from 9.7 to 9.3 in arcade and from 9.3 to 9.0 in realistic. For Italy, their aircraft, the G55S, was moved for realistic from 4.7 to 5.0, which I'd say is a few years too late. The G91 pre-series was moved from 8.7 to 8.3 in realistic, which would be kind of fun, and the R1 was moved in arcade from 8.7 to 8.3, while the R4 was moved from 9.0 to 8.7 in arcade. For their tanks, the M47 105-55 in realistic was moved from 7.7 to 7.3, the Centauro Remars was moved in realistic from 9.3 to 9.0, and the MGS was moved from 10.3 to 10.0 in arcade, while the Ariete PSO was moved from 10.3 to 10.7 in arcade and realistic. For other movements in their tree, the 9053 M41M was moved before the 7546 M43, speaking of which, it was positioned out of its group, and the 10525 M43 and 7543 M43 have been grouped together. And for their newly added boats, the MV661 was moved from 2.7 to 2.3, as well as had switched places with the MS472. The Turbine type destroyer was moved from 4.0 to 3.7. The Bartolomeo Colleoni was moved from 5.3 to 5.0, and the Trento was moved from 5.7 to 5.3. Also changing in the Italian naval line was the AVS 201 and MS15 switched places. And finally, for the French, the only change in their air tree was the D500 and the D501 had been grouped together. For the French ground vehicles, the ARL 44 was moved from 5.7 to 5.3, the Roland 1 in realistic was moved from 10.0 to 9.7, and the Eclair S1 was moved from 10.3 to 10.7. For their helicopters, the Tiger Hap was moved from 10.0 to 10.3, and the Tiger Had was moved from 10.3 to 10.7. And actually, finally, because I forgot to put the little line here like I did in the other trees, for Swedish aircraft, the J32B was moved across the board from 9.3 to 9.7. For Swedish ground vehicles and realistic, the PVKV2 was moved from 4.7 to 4.0. The IKV103 for realistic was moved from 5.7 to 5.3. I can't wait for that thing to go even lower. And the LVRBV107 was moved from 9.0 to 9.3. And finally, the STRV122, and you probably guessed what's going to happen in this one, was moved from 10.3 to 10.7. And that is all the battle rating changes. This list was prepared for me by AVS once again. A big thank you to him. The most interesting thing is that they are indeed moving the battle rating up from 10.3 to 10.7. However, I don't think that's big enough of a jump, and I would like to see something more substantial like 11.0 or 11.7. It's quite hilarious that the Panther D had been moved to 5.3, as Wearaboos forever have been asking for it to be moved to 5.3, despite it being quite a good tank, though it is notably worse than the other Panthers, and I would have to often play it as a tank destroyer because the turret traverse is just so awful. But that is just about all the news. The last thing I have to read for you is my Patreons and YouTube members. And because this video is a little late, I'm going to be thanking the old list because, well, actually, Patreon once again logged me out, and I'm actually literally too lazy to log back in, so I'm just going to read what I have saved. So, big thank you to Red Fox and Sukublet Idinahwe, as well as Peter Konglinski, Nico Korkamaki, the Royal Rat. I like them thick. Mehmet Hazarchi, Droblavsky, Tex, One Max, Roger Rimmer, Grimace, Mighty Peppers, Pointless Gunslinks, and Waffly Joker 6. A big thank you to all of you, patrons and YouTube members. Get videos uploaded a little bit early, unique Discord role, and once again, permissions in my Minecraft server, which I hope is functioning correctly. If you ever get in trouble on there, jump onto my Discord. The guy who runs it is there, so I could just ping him and ask him questions about it, or you could ping him directly. But anyways, if you have any comments, concerns, or questions, be sure to hit me up down below or on my Discord if you'd like to the video, be sure to hit the like button. If you didn't like the video, don't hit the like button. If you want to see more, hit the subscribe button. I make War Thunder Week news videos every Sunday. I make reviews throughout the week, and I like to stream on Saturdays. So thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video, and have a great day. In the terms of bonus news, most of the stuff here isn't actually news, it's a joke. So, inspired of that, it seems that World War Mode is a joke right now because the servers keep on crashing. So, World War Mode is your bonus news.